All pilots must complete ILS PRM approach training before accepting a clearance for a simultaneous close parallel ILS PRM approach. Viewing of this video is a training requirement for general aviation pilots flying transport category aircraft. For operations under Part 121, 129, and 135, pilots must also comply with FAA-approved company training. To increase arrival rates at many of today's heavily congested airports, simultaneous approaches are conducted to parallel runways. For many years, the FAA has permitted simultaneous independent approach operations to those parallel runways with a minimum separation of 4,300 feet. In operations where runway spacing is at least 4,300 feet, pilots fly the ILS course while being monitored by air traffic controllers using radar with a 4.8-second update rate, which provides the required level of safety. Years of experience have produced pilots that are familiar and comfortable with the requirements to conduct these approaches efficiently. In recent years, the FAA has approved simultaneous approaches to runways spaced a minimum of 3,000 feet apart when the procedure incorporates a high update rate Precision Runway Monitor PRM radar system. These approaches to runways spaced less than 4,300 feet apart are referred to as PRM approaches. This video is intended to assist pilots in becoming familiar with the specific approach plate notations, attention all users page requirements, and pilot procedures associated with conducting PRM approaches. When conducting approaches to runways separated by between 3,000 feet and 4,300 feet, enhanced radar surveillance is required to provide the same level of safety as that achieved in more widely spaced runways. The airspace between the ILS approach courses is monitored by the state-of-the-art Precision Runway Monitor PRM system. Its capabilities include a 1-second update rate, color video displays, oral and visual alerts, and position predictive software that provides controllers with nearly instantaneous aircraft dynamics. With the reduced course separation, specific procedures are required to provide controllers and pilots with the capability to react quickly to situations in an appropriate manner. This is achieved by requiring PRM-specific training. Flight procedures described in this video are not aircraft-specific. Pilots shall refer to specific company policies and aircraft manuals for information relative to conducting PRM approaches in their specific aircraft. The Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport ILS PRM approach to runway 30 left will be used in the approach discussion. The JEPSON and NACO government formats will both be addressed. Prior to the flight, pilots shall ensure that they meet the training requirements and that the aircraft is properly equipped to conduct a PRM approach. The terminal ATIS will broadcast that ILS PRM approaches are in progress. Pilots should brief the appropriate ILS PRM approach, which includes a review of the Attention All Users page. A PRM approach can easily be identified by the letters PRM in the approach name. The words simultaneous close parallel are also prominently displayed on the approach plate. In addition, a dedicated monitor frequency for each PRM approach is depicted. A more in-depth discussion of the use of this frequency is contained later in this video. Pilots are reminded that this is a receive-only frequency. A reminder of the dual communications requirement is displayed on the approach chart. An operational glide slope is required. Therefore, only straight-in ILS minimums are published for an ILS PRM approach. Should the glide slope be inoperative or not received, the ILS approach becomes localizer only and does not meet PRM requirements. The pilot is directed to additional information relative to approach requirements that is provided on the Attention All Users page. This page is to be reviewed prior to conducting a PRM approach. On the Jeppesen approach plate, an additional note is added to direct the pilot to the page number of the Attention All Users page. The Attention All Users page in the Jeppesen format is identified by the appropriate page number, in this case 11-0, the page title, Attention All Users of ILS Precision Runway Monitor PRM, and a list of the approaches by runway designation to which the title page applies. The NACO Attention All Users page format depicts the applicable approach name and the simultaneous close parallel approach heading. The Attention All Users page reminds pilots that special training is required prior to executing a PRM approach. The method for advising ATC that pilots are unable to accept a PRM approach is also spelled out on the Attention All Users page. Pilots are reminded that each airport has its own requirements for this notification. Arrival delays may be encountered if the pilot cannot execute the PRM approach. Besides the items listed on the briefing page, additional company training requirements must be met. The approach fixes, approach altitudes, ILS minimums, and missed approach requirements are the same for the ILS PRM and ILS approaches. Therefore, if the pilot briefs the ILS PRM approach and ATC subsequently changes the approach from ILS PRM to ILS, the pilot is considered briefed for the ILS approach and may continue to use the ILS PRM approach plate. In this situation, the use of the dedicated monitor frequency is not required. The pilot is provided with specific communications procedures that have been established to ensure that monitor controller transmissions are not blocked. The tower controller's transmissions are simulcast on both the tower frequency and a second monitor frequency. The PRM monitor controller's transmissions override both the tower frequency and the monitor frequency. As is customary, the pilot transmits and receives only on the tower frequency, and when conducting PRM approaches, also maintains a listening watch on the secondary monitor frequency. Even if the tower frequency is blocked, the monitor controller can be heard on the secondary frequency. Prior to initiating the approach, the pilot tunes the monitor frequency and adjusts the receiver volume to about the same level as the primary communications radio. Then the pilot deselects the monitor frequency audio. When instructed by approach control to contact the tower, the pilot should then reselect the monitor frequency audio. Procedures for responding to an ATC breakout instruction are presented, including a reminder that all breakouts are to be hand-flown. These procedures are presented in detail in the following discussion. Each final approach course is monitored by a separate controller who observes the approaching aircraft on his PRM radar monitor. A 2,000-foot wide no transgression zone NTZ is centered between the approach courses and is prominently displayed on the controller's monitor. If a monitor controller observes an aircraft deviating toward the NTZ, he will immediately issue instructions in an attempt to return the aircraft to the approach course.
Cheyenne 3-4, turn right, return to the localizer course.
If the aircraft continues off course and enters the NTZ, a controller will immediately issue a breakout instruction to an aircraft on the adjacent final. Breakout instructions normally consist of a turn and a climb or descent.
Traffic alert, All America 12 Heavy. Turn left immediately, heading 210. Climb and maintain 4,000.
Instances where aircraft actually penetrate the NTZ are very rare. However, when the monitor controller does give a breakout instruction in the form of a traffic alert, the pilot must assume that a conflict exists and act immediately. the controller will rarely issue a descending breakout.
Traffic alert, All America 12 Heavy, turn left immediately heading 210, descend and maintain 2,500.
The descending breakout instruction will only be issued if a conflict prevents issuing a climbing breakout. A descending breakout maneuver will never be issued when it would result in the aircraft descending below the minimum vectoring altitude. A breakout maneuver is not a missed approach or rejected landing and should be treated with the same pilot response as any other high-priority time-critical maneuver. Pilots should be prepared to respond to a breakout instruction at any time during the approach. The traffic alert phraseology used during a breakout is spelled out on the briefing page. Pilot response to a controller's instructions in an expeditious manner is essential. Pilots can receive breakout instructions from ATC during any instrument approach, not just PRM or other closely spaced approaches. Proper execution of any breakout instruction requires crew coordination and pre-planning of the maneuver to manage configuration changes, avionics settings, and flight director cues to ensure that they are properly sequenced in a timely manner. The ILS courses are the primary means of ensuring traffic separation between aircraft on the adjacent approach courses. The ATC breakout instruction ensures traffic separation in the event that the protected airspace between the approach courses is violated. For aircraft equipped with TCAS, pilots are provided with additional traffic awareness in the unlikely event that other separation methods fail. The TCAS provides only vertical resolution of aircraft conflicts, while the ATC breakout instruction provides both vertical and horizontal guidance for conflict resolutions. If the pilot receives both a TCAS RA and a traffic alert,
Traffic alert, All America 12 Heavy, turn left immediately heading 210, climb and maintain 4,000.
it is important to execute the turn called for in the breakout instruction while following the TCAS RA. Pilots should continue to comply with the turn portion of the ATC breakout instruction unless doing so would jeopardize safety. These procedures assure the pilot that acceptable separation margins will always be provided. If following a RA is opposite to the climb descent portion of the breakout instruction,
Traffic alert, All America 12 Heavy, turn left immediately heading 210, climb and maintain 4,000.
pilots shall advise ATC as soon as practical that they are deviating from an ATC clearance. Off-course deviations toward the NTZ should be minimized. Such deviations that may appear insignificant to the pilot on his course indicator may in fact be sufficient to position the aircraft inside the NTZ. This will require the monitor controller to issue a breakout instruction to the aircraft approaching the adjacent runway. This note reinforces the need for pilot training based on the type of operation being conducted and directs the pilot to the FAA's PRM training website. The ILS PRM approach provides significant operational efficiencies at airports that are critical to the efficient operation of the National Airspace System. Conducted within the framework of the procedures described in this video, PRM approaches offer levels of safety equivalent to other ILS approaches. At certain airports with less than 3,000 feet parallel runway spacing, simultaneous ILS PRM and LDA PRM approaches may be conducted. All pilots must be familiar with the following procedures prior to accepting an ILS PRM or LDA PRM approach. When parallel runways are spaced less than 3,000 feet apart, conventional simultaneous ILS PRM close parallel approaches cannot be conducted. To further increase the utilization of runways spaced less than 3,000 feet apart, the FAA has developed Simultaneous Offset Instrument Approach SOIA criteria. SOIA permits simultaneous approaches to runways spaced less than 3,000 feet to as close as 750 feet apart. SOIA approaches combine ILS PRM procedures with a visual segment used to complete the approach to one of the runways. In the Soya procedure, the electronic course spacing, rather than the runway spacing, meets close parallel approach criteria. Because standard closely spaced approach procedures are used until the aircraft are operating in visual conditions, pilots must have completed applicable PRM training and also be familiar with Soya procedures before conducting the approach. The Soya concept utilizes a straight-in ILS PRM approach to one runway and a 2.5 to 3.0 degree offset localizer-type directional aid LDA PRM approach with glide slope to the adjacent parallel runway. Aircraft on the ILS and LDA approaches are paired, with the LDA aircraft following the ILS aircraft. Cloud ceilings are established so that the LDA aircraft has ample time to visually acquire the ILS aircraft before reaching the LDA missed approach point. The LDA MAP is positioned so that the LDA aircraft can easily maneuver to intercept the landing runway extended center line. The no transgression zone terminates abeam the LDA MAP. Pilots flying the ILS approach should be aware that inside the LDA MAP, the LDA aircraft will be maneuvering nearby to align with the adjacent LDA runway. Pilots will know that a Soya operation is in progress when they hear the ATIS advertise that simultaneous ILS PRM and LDA PRM approaches are in progress. Both approach plates will contain the words simultaneous close parallel. The Soya ILS PRM and LDA PRM approach plates and attention all users pages are similar to those used for conventional ILS PRM approaches. Additional information for Soya includes the spacing between the runways used for simultaneous operations and the weather minimums in which simultaneous approaches are authorized. The LDA PRM approach plate also indicates that DME is required. The LDA PRM Attention All Users page advises the pilot to remain on the LDA course until passing the intersection used as the LDA MAP. This procedure ensures that the LDA aircraft will not inadvertently penetrate the no transgression zone while maneuvering to align with the runway. The LDA PRM Attention All Users page contains the pilot responsibilities and procedures in the visual segment of the approach. If no mention is made of traffic on the ILS, the only pilot responsibility when conducting the LDA PRM approach is to have the runway in sight prior to reaching the LDA MAP. If, on the other hand, ATC informs the pilot that there is traffic on the ILS, then all of the procedures and responsibilities contained on the briefing page are applicable. Before it reaches the LDA MAP, the LDA aircraft will always be positioned to follow the ILS aircraft to facilitate visual acquisition of that aircraft. As soon as it is apparent that the ILS traffic will remain in sight, the pilot of the LDA aircraft will report traffic in sight. It is important for the pilot to understand that the tower controller is not obligated to acknowledge this transmission. Proceeding past the LDA MAP to land requires 3 pilot actions: having the ILS traffic in sight, having reported the ILS traffic in sight to ATC, and having the runway in sight. Otherwise, the pilot must execute a missed approach at the LDA MAP. The pilot is responsible for visually separating his aircraft from the ILS aircraft between the LDA MAP and the landing threshold. If appropriate, ATC will issue wake turbulence advisories. When the ceiling is less than 500 feet above the minimum vectoring altitude, normally a ceiling of about 2,000 feet, aircraft pairing will always provide wake turbulence mitigation unless an FAA study has determined that the approach geometry mitigates wake turbulence issues. In the event that visual contact with the ILS aircraft is lost, the LDA pilot will be expected to execute a missed approach unless ATC provides other instructions. The Soya geometry can be seen in this view of the PRM radar display used by the monitor controller during a Soya approach. Paired arrivals can be seen with sufficient distance between the pairs to permit departures on the same or crossing runways. SOIA weather minimums typically range between 1,600-foot ceiling and 4 miles visibility and 1,200-foot ceiling and 3 miles visibility, depending on runway spacing and operational considerations. The runways are depicted at the bottom of the display. Traffic on the right side of the screen is landing on the ILS runway, while traffic on the left side of the screen is landing on the LDA runway. Each dash and each space represent 1 nautical mile along the approach course. The 2,000-foot wide no transgression zone is located equidistant between the final approach courses. ATC procedures for coping with NTZ penetrations and pilot responses to breakout instructions are identical to those used in ILS PRM operations. The horizontal scale is expanded to 4 times greater than the vertical scale to provide controllers with a magnified view of the airspace between the approach courses. Because of this 4-to-1 difference, the angle between the 2 approach courses and the LDA maneuvering are exaggerated. The spacing between the courses is approximately 6,000 feet at 12 miles from the airport and 3,000 feet at the LDA missed approach point. In the lowest authorized ceiling conditions, the LDA aircraft will descend below the clouds with nominally 30 seconds to visually acquire the aircraft approaching the ILS runway. Once visual contact has been established and reported to ATC and the runway environment is in sight, the LDA aircraft may continue past the missed approach point and proceed visually to the airport for landing. The approach is designed so that the LDA aircraft can join the extended runway centerline in stabilized flight 500 feet above the runway elevation. LDA glide slope guidance is valid to Cat 1 standards. Visual vertical guidance is also provided on the LDA runway by a VASI or PAPI. Site-specific SOIA procedures take precedence over the general information presented in this video. The procedures described in this video are representative of airport efficiencies that can be attained through the application of innovative procedures and sophisticated technology. These approaches exemplify the FAA's continuing efforts to build a more efficient national airspace system.